right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to the last session of the day. We hope that this is a good one for you. So we're going to talk about Tier 2 implementation strategies. Just a little bit of information about who we are. This is Brittany Smith, our school counselor. I'm Kim Tierney. I'm our school psychologist. We've both been working for 10 years. This is my 10th year 11 years. This is my 10th year in the district and Brittany's 11th.
Correct.
Do you want to say a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so again, school counselor. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, school counselor at Lewistown Intermediate for 11 years, as she said. Prior to my work in schools, I did work in partial hospitalization, did some grief and loss work with Shippensburg University during my grad work there, inpatient with adults for a bit, and mobile therapy behavior specialist prior to that. So a lot of former mental health experience, which I think is really beneficial in our role here. And like I said, we've had a really collaborative relationship our entire career so far. So we're happy to be able to share some of our tips and tricks.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm Kim Tierney. I've been working for 11 years. I did all of my grad work out in California, and then I moved to Pennsylvania because I am a fool and like the cold. But we like it here, so we're staying around. And like Brittany said, we have a good working relationship, so we're hoping that we can share our Tier 2 successes with you so that you can have Tier 2 success in your buildings, because Tier 2 is challenging. So a little bit about our school. This was from the first day of school, the only picture I took. We are a 4th and 5th grade building. We have 11 4th grades and 11 5th grades. We've got about 500 kiddos in rural central PA in a very interesting area that is both like urban city and also farms. So we do have a pretty high poverty population that we're working with. All of our students get free and reduced lunch for breakfast as well. Our building has about 25% special ed. So we have 4 autistic support / life skills classrooms, an itinerant emotional support teacher, 6 learning support teachers, and 1 speech and language pathologist. So we have a lot of need in our building. So we were really hesitant to start our Tier 2 because we were really scared, like I'm sure a lot of your schools are, like once you screen, you have to intervene. And we were really scared about like, oh my gosh, what is the screening gonna turn up and how are we possibly going to meet all of those needs? And we just decided like, let's just jump in and start. And my advice to you guys, if you're getting into Tier 2 implementation, is just, it's okay to build it as you go. Something is better than nothing. It is okay to intervene in small steps. You don't have to have everything, all the problems solved before you intervene. Because the problems are out there and we all know that, whether or not we intervene or screen or not. So just before we get into our kind of the meat of our presentation, I want to get a sense of like who we have here. How many of you are regular ed teachers? All right. How about special ed teachers? Cool. Thanks for being here, y'all. What about school counselors? And school psychologists? My sister would be so mad if I didn't ask this. Speech and language pathologists? Yeah. All right. How about administrators? And then like our IU and patent supports. All right, we have it's like very evenly split. Yeah, that's great. Nice. Anybody I missed? Anything I missed? Yeah?
Health and phys ed.
Oh, health and phys ed, all right. So special area teachers, thanks.
Our MTSS teacher.
Ooh, an MTSS teacher,
excellent.
that's cool. I'm so jealous. I want one of those.
Come on. We all need one.
Yeah. All right, cool. Okay, so we use the SRSS for our screening, and we have since the beginning because it is free. So that's super easy to get admin buy-in if you're not asking them to spend any money. And also, it's pretty quick and easy, and it doesn't involve a whole lot of teacher time. How many of you guys use the SRSS or have heard of it? So a lot more heard of it. A few use it. So we're going to go through how we use it, because I do think that our data analysis piece is part of what makes us successful at our Tier 2 implementation. So we've got 8 steps to go through today, and I think the first 4, 1 through 5 are data analysis. So we have our teachers fill this out twice a year in October and January. We like to do it in October because that gives them, we get through the honeymoon period where the like really nice little boys and girls from the first few days of school are gone, and we have the true kids. And also it gives the teachers a sense of what their kids need as we go. And then we do it again in January after we've run one set of groups to get a new set. Let me see. So the teachers fill this out based on the 7 externalizing factors. So from STEAL, lie, cheat, sneak, behavior problem, peer rejection, low academic achievement, negative attitude, and aggressive behavior. So that is your externalizing total for those. And then the internalizing total is from emotionally flat through lonely. And one thing we really like about the SRSS is it helps us catch our kiddos who have internalizing problems. Our friends like Goofy, who is really high for externalizing problems, like we know him. We've seen him. We know about Goofy already. He's been referred to us for office discipline referrals because that he's, you know, getting in his teacher's face kind of thing. But like an example, a student like Mulan, who's high for internalizing, we may not know about her yet. So this helps us find those kids. So once our teachers fill these out, they send them all back to us. And then I go through and I sort out our students. So we pull out all of the kiddos that are high on externalizing. We pull out all of the kiddos that are high on internalizing. And then we pull out all the kids that are high on both. So obviously the kids that are high on both are going to be our highest need. And then we, from there, determine kind of who is at the highest need and work down. The SRSS sets these cut scores for us. Anything above 9 on externalizing is considered significant. Anything above 4 on internalizing is considered significant. So the threshold for internalizing is much lower. And we use this to then get information from the teachers. So obviously, these internalizing kiddos, if we don't know anything about them, it's hard for us to determine what sort of support is most appropriate for them. So we used to have a paper and pencil follow-up form that we gave teachers, but we then transitioned it to Google just because we can get it back much faster. So we create one of these per teacher, and it has their student that was elevated or students that were elevated, and then some potential options for a tier 2 service. So like for example, Goofy, you'll remember he was elevated on externalizing and internalizing. So his teacher might check that he needs a skill group, and then she would say what kind of skill group might be most appropriate in the last section. And we do have an option for nothing needed. Sometimes the teachers are like, well, they were high on that week, but then they were okay. And I'll talk about what we do with them later, but I did want to acknowledge that we do include that as well. And this does help us get teacher buy-in too, because they have more ownership in the process of what services their students are receiving. So then we come to our decision making. From this, the first thing we do is we go through and we label all of the things that students are already receiving in bold. So for example, you can see that Buzz Lightyear, Pinocchio, and Donald Duck all already receive emotional support services. So they're already getting a higher level of service. They likely aren't going to need a group or check in, check out with us. And then from there, we divide out what the teacher said. So the teacher said that Goofy, Merida, Lilo, and Pluto all needed some social skills support. And Prince Charming, Tarzan, and Belle all needed some general mental health. Oh, I got some typos in there. All needed some general mental health support. So we divide this all up. And then from there, we can kind of talk about like what curriculums we want to use. So for mindfulness, we have one that's called Zen Kids that we got from Counselor Carey's page. It has a lot of, it's not necessarily in itself an evidence-based curriculum, but it's based on evidence-based practices. We also have Mind Up from Goldie Hawn's Foundation, that's really good. or we have different social skills curriculums and things like that. So from there, we decide kind of talking about what we know about those kids and what we know are what we have available to us, what they would benefit from. And then we organize them. So this just helps us kind of see all of our kids that need social skills supports, all of our kids that need general mental health. Obviously, we're not going to have a group that's that big because that would be a hot mess. If you're putting all of those kids that need a tier 2 intervention all in one room. So then we can figure out based on what we know about the kids and who will work well together and who will definitely not work well together, how we can formulate them out. And honestly, sometimes it just depends on like, well, this kid has special first thing in the morning, so they can't be in the first group. And unfortunately, that's the reality. But we try and make it based mostly on what, how they'll work together. Because I don't know if you've ever run a social skills group where they all just like sit there and stare at you while you're trying to teach them conversation skills. It's not great. So we try and put in a couple of, in our social skills groups in particular, like if I'm like, okay, I know Jiminy Cricket's got things to say, I'm gonna put him in with these 4 who never speak. And then from there, we move on to talking, notifying the parents.
Yes, so again, after all that legwork's done, we then move into some collaboration with the parents or the other grown-ups at home, just to let them know what's going on so that they have this information about what intervention we're proposing for their students and for how long that will be running. So included in all of this presentation at the end, you'll see a link and have all of this information, but same template, just depending on what skill group we're using, we just adjust the text a bit and share it out. In our district, we are permitted to do a passive consent for this, which is helpful, obviously, because we typically get 40-ish or so students per group. So rather than having to wait for all of them to come back signed, this is a way for us to get to work quickly and efficiently. I will say it's pretty rare that parents opt out. This time we've had 2, and that might be the most in one round that we've ever had. And so obviously, we communicate that to the teacher. At this point, some of the ones that had opted out, but teachers still have concerns about, we plan to go to the parent-teacher conference and just see how we can best support. So if they say no to this, it doesn't have to be the end of the road, but obviously we do have to be respectful and further communicate with the parents about what they're comfortable with. So next, obviously, implementation. So our tier 2 options, first of all, is Teacher Buddy. Does anybody run a Teacher Buddy type program at their school at this point? So it's kind of like a less formal version of check-in and check-out. And to be honest, of our tier 2 options, Teacher Buddy is the one we're still kind of working out some kinks. We need it to be a little bit structured, but not so much that it sort of deters teachers from joining and being willing to help us with that. But also, we don't need it so formal that we're spending a lot of instructional minutes in morning and afternoon for that. So our next option would be check-in and check-out. Again, that's more formalized, and that is typically run by our emotional support teacher. And then lastly, we have our social and emotional skills groups. So in terms of check-in and check-out, this is the standard form that we use. Historically, it's always been paper pencil. Everybody gets a purple folder. They have this in, so everybody that has a purple folder and all of our teachers know what the purple folder means and that they need to fill it out. So this year, we actually moved on to PBIS Rewards, which is an app for all of our PBIS points, earning, and you can also do check-in and check-out. So is anyone familiar with this application or program, or maybe we've seen it, used it? It is a bit costly, and so that's some of the deterrent. But they do have that option that if you would like to do check-in and check-out on here, it immediately graphs the data, which is a nice feature. For our paper and pencil, our emotional support teacher does graph monthly. Did you have a question?
I was just wondering if you find that teachers have an easier time to remember this, like being electronic versus paper.
I think it's the opposite. I think the tangible one, at least so far this year, again, this is our first time running it this way, and the emotional support teacher had agreed with that, in fact, that when we have that folder and the teacher's kind of prompted and the student is prompted to remind their teacher, we do really try and have the kids advocate and sort of be responsible for this so that they are taking ownership in that to also get it filled out for their points.
Yeah, this is our first year using this, like she said, and I think that the kids are used to the purple folder and they carry the purple folder, and so there's a lot of accountability on them to give it to their teacher. And the teacher they forget about this because they have 18 billion things on their mind at the end of the lesson, and check out is not one of them. So we're still working out the kinks on like, should we have like something for the kid to give to their teacher at the end of the lesson so that they can, or the end of the block. So we're still working out the kinks, but no, unfortunately, they are not more likely.
No, and I think that you'll find in any of the situation with Tier 2, it's always kind of what's working, any new implementation or anything that we've already got in place, it's always sort of a work in progress. When we add new things, we add new staff, new students, different demographics, I think it all really comes into play. So then moving on to our social emotional groups. These are typically twice per 6-day cycle. 30 minutes each, and we run them approximately for 6 weeks. So that's not how everyone in the district does. We have some that only meet once per cycle, some do their groups during lunch. I personally feel that would be a disaster for us, so we don't do it at lunchtime. We also have a very large lunch block from 10:45 to 1:15, so again, it's really difficult for us to get the kids that we need during the specific time. So for us, first thing in the morning seems to work well. Again, we do have morning specials that we have to work around, and band as well. Otherwise, we're usually able to get things in order so everybody can participate. So here I just have some of our group topics. Again, not all of these curriculums are necessarily completely evidence-based. However, they all have evidence-based components. Many of them are from Counselor Carey. I don't know if any school counselors know Counselor Carey, but it's great. She also includes like fidelity checks and things like that within the programming, so it's easy in terms of implementing. I also track attendance. Again, you can do this electronically. You will receive a copy of this form or print it out and put it on. We always do the option of if they've missed more than 50% of our meetings, that they are allowed to repeat the intervention. And then progress monitoring, so our check-in and check-out data, like I had mentioned, if it's not graphed electronically, the teacher will graph that for us. It's shared with us for our monthly meetings. And then our social emotional groups do include a pre and post test. And then we also look at what is their score. We're looking at the fall, how do they rate them again in January. And then anybody that ends up in our January groups, we just have the teachers rate kids that were in an intervention, again on SRSS. So we have from the teacher perspective, and we have the pre and post test. So just 2 separate data points. And then just some helpful tips, again, starting small. I think this can be overwhelming. Who already has Tier 2 up and running? Just a show of hands. Okay, and then how many are sort of in that beginning stage where we're looking to start implementing? Okay. And so again, this took us a while, obviously, and so trial and error and just doing some things informally, and then it sort of came to fruition for us. So also using previously made curriculums and online resources. Again, let's try not to reinvent the wheel if we have things out there that can be helpful to us. One thing that I personally do, any curriculum that I'm using with students, if it's something that they need their own personal packet, I prep all of that up front. So I know, for example, I'm doing Worry Warriors for Counselor Carey from that curriculum this round, so I've already printed, like it says session 1, and then everything that the kids need, and it's all in a folder. It stays with me, and so if we do a bit of that legwork up front, then it's not so overwhelming. I learned that the hard way, but just again, helpful tip. And then tracking to prove the necessity for this. So tracking the information in terms of how long are we spending on this amount of, or how much time are we spending on this work? How many kids are being impacted? How many kids are coming up high on the screener? And one thing I'll say about the percentage of students that are coming up, and a lot of the ones we can pull out initially, it's helpful information because if we already know these kids are receiving school-based therapy, or they're seeing the social worker, or they already have emotional support, I think that we do a good job at sort of picking out those Tier 3 kids initially. Again, especially the ones with more externalizing behaviors, we tend to see easier and more quickly within the school year. And again, if you're seeing like, oh, we're doing a really good job at identifying these Tier 3 kids, we've got Tier 2 solid, then maybe it's time to consider Tier 3 and talking to your IU about if maybe we should be checking into that to see if we're ready for banner status. So on that note, just using your local IU for support as well. and obviously they have the TFI, the Fidelity Inventory. And so you already have those resources where you can kind of look at that and score yourself to see where we are and decide, is this a time that maybe we do want to try and focus on a banner status?
And I will add, for tracking to prove the necessity, our Title I coordinator has come to me several times asking for data to support the need for different social emotional grants. And part of the reason why we have so much mental health support in our district is because it's grant funded. So we have, we're really lucky, we have 2 full-time social workers that function in like a traditional social worker role. We also have 2 school-based therapists, and we have 2 therapeutic social workers, and a lot of that is, if not all of it, is grant funded, and having this SRSS data saying like, look, 30% of our kids are consistently coming up high on this SRSS screener. That's a lot of kids. We need a lot of support. That has been really helpful for him in including in grants. Do you have a question? Great. Mm-hmm. Yep, so the question was, is the pre and post test that we mentioned, is that in the SRSS or is that separate? So the student risk screening scale, easy for me to say, SRSS is just the Excel type sheet. It doesn't have any pre or post tests along with it. The pre and post tests are either one tests that we have made that match the curriculum. So for example, for the Mind Up curriculum, I made a pre-test that has the core things I want the kids to learn from that curriculum, or it comes with the assessment. Like the zones of regulation has a pre and post test along with it. So they're either ones we have made or they come with the programs.
And I guess my second question, so this is more so mental health accounts. What about like academic support or that portion?
That's why we need that teacher back there.
Yeah, so that question was about the academic piece of Tier 2 implementation. So our district does have a lot of MTSS academic support. However, almost all of that is funded K to 3, and we're a 4 or 5 building. So unfortunately, at this point, a lot of our academic Tier 2 supports are either through differentiated instruction with the classroom teacher, or our building sub can sometimes run interventions when she's not covering a class. So we need a lot more academic support. We're working on it, but right now we are successful with Tier 2 because that is what we can control. Yeah.
The other thing in terms of, starting small, also getting creative. So for example, we've had a few rounds of the screening where one homeroom in particular just got lucky enough to have, like 12 kids that really need intervention. And so at that point, obviously, we're not going to pull 12 kids for intervention. We're just going to talk to the teacher and principal about, is it okay for us to go in and do a Tier 1 intervention? So actually this round, that happened again. So I'm going to be running general mental health as a Tier 1 in one of our classrooms in particular. So there is some flexibility depending on what you're comfortable with and what your administrators will allow for. Also kind of working towards your strengths. So social skills, general mental health, anxiety, I typically take those. And Mrs. Tierney is nice enough to take the wiggly ones for regulation and mindfulness. So again, if you have other people that you can lean on to help facilitate some of these groups, again, you can get creative in that way. In years past, we've sometimes even had our school resource officer express an interest in wanting to do some of these groups. So she had done some of that for us. At one point, we've had learning support teachers in the past who have really been struggling with like self-regulation and things like that, run some groups just as a benefit to those kids in particular. So there are ways that you can get this done, again, sort of in informal ways, and then the more that you do it, the more structured it can become for you.
And we're also, our IU does all of our second step programming. So part of our building schedule is a second step block once a cycle for each classroom teacher. So that is helpful that they have that foundation of Tier 1. And we also have morning meetings as a district initiative. So that's another option if we see that like, man, your whole class came up high for anxiety. Here's a whole bunch of morning meeting resources that you can use in your morning meeting as opposed to running. Like, we're not going to pull 12 kids from one class for a group.
Right.
That's 2 groups from one classroom. That's half your class. That's silly.
Right. So it's nice that they already have that Tier 1 foundation, and it's nice for me and the students that I'm not in the specials rotation. So any school counselors, are you in the specials rotation? so sorry, right? So sorry. So maybe some of the screening data would be helpful to know that you're needed in other places to run some more targeted interventions. So again, just sort of getting creative, tracking some data, I think, is obviously helpful. And then, so the things that, oh, I'm
You have a
sorry.
question?
So, because I want to clarify what you just said, I believe. You don't have to be like a certified school counselor or school psychologist to be running these groups.
No.
So
No,
the question, wait, hold on, we gotta repeat the question, remember, it's being recorded. The question was, do you have to be a certified school counselor or school psychologist to run tier 2 groups? No.
Are there any that you do?
There are certain curriculums that you have to be specifically trained on to run, like CBITS or there's a bouncy something, bounce back. Yes, thank you. There are certain ones that you have to go through their training to implement, but you would know that when you can't just like go and like download it or buy it.
No.
Yeah.
Now, and obviously some people would be more comfortable doing this versus others, especially, the general mental health. But no, it's not necessary that we have that. And to be honest, I know in the area that I live personally, we have a lot of school counselors that are in fact emergency certified and don't necessarily have a lot of experience in the field. So again, it's not a requirement. Obviously, it's helpful. But if people are willing and able to help you, I think, certainly take that up. So again, we have some forms for you here and the bit.ly link, and if you want to scan that. This presentation will also be in that folder of information that we've shared with you. So if you have other questions, concerns, ideas for us, we're happy to take that. And at this time, if other people have questions, again, we're happy to help you out or answer anything you might have.
Yeah, now that you know what we do, how can we help you? Yeah, go ahead.
So, just a general question. Since you've now been implementing tier 2 fidelity, what kind of results have you seen? Have you been able to track that? Like, what kind of success rate?
Sure, it's kind of hard because we're only a 4 or 5 building, so we only have these kids for 2 years. So it's like we put a group in place and then they're gone. I will say that I tracked last year our repeat customers, and we are decreasing in our repeat customers. Is it statistically significant? I don't know. I don't know that I have enough of a sample size to say that, but I think that it also helps with just general school climate too, that the teachers know that they're not tasked with solving this problem on their own. And it's not just like, hey, here's a bunch of strategies that you can do. It's, hey, here's a bunch of strategies you can do, and also here's how I'm going to help.
Right.
And just to follow up there, speaking of the teachers, with the check-in, check-out specifically, have you had any teachers that have given you a little bit of pushback to okay, well now I have to fill out this skill card for this kid at the end of every period, and maybe I have a couple kids that are check-in, check-out. What's been your experience with that? Maybe ways you respond to that?
Sure. So with check-in, check-out, he was asking, do we have teacher pushback with check-in, check-out, with teachers saying, I've already got too much on my plate. I can't deal with this. I've got too many kids. I don't have time. Do you want to speak to that, Mrs. Smith?
Right. So, obviously we do get some mumbles and grumbles. I don't know that I've ever had anyone flat out refuse. We do sometimes notice some trends, and, I think a good argument might be, we're trying this as an intervention to help you. If it's not working, if it's not something that you're able to accommodate and make time for, is there another way that we can help you or something that's more appropriate? So we can offer solutions, and I would say that that's mostly how we handle it. Again, I think, as educators, we can all understand, none of us need one more thing to do. However, I think that most of them realize if this is something that's going to benefit them in some way and help the student to better, be able to regulate and focus in the classroom, that they're fine to do it.
Typically, kids that are referred for check-in, check-out are not just sitting in their classroom doing what they're supposed to do all day long. They typically are they typically are a pain point for their teachers, and so they're often usually willing to work with us on that. Though sometimes teachers, you have the pushback in every building of I don't believe in this. I don't think kids should have to. I don't think should have to give kids points for doing a good job, and you have that everywhere, and you just kind of work through it with trying to build a relationship with that teacher, trying to say look, we're all on the same team here. How can we? If you're not on board with this, how can I help you?
Can I piggyback that?
Sure.
I heard you mention
she'll perhaps do something tier 3 and maybe give the child some coaching and a little bit of a different, that was the consistent feedback that I would get. And obviously, if a child has that, they're very dysregulated more than likely, and they have other needs. So maybe point sheets aren't the best thing for him. But when the point sheets are successful with the teacher and student, you have success all around. So I think that if you have that pushback and those hurdles, maybe try a different approach. But as a whole, your teachers will have buy-in. I'm really excited for you, and I'm so passionate about this. And these ladies are great. So I want you to definitely leave here encouraged because there's so many benefits.
Yeah, we're excited too. We don't do a physical point sheet. We do an electronic point sheet. We have different reasons for going that route, you know. It's probably a better fit for us. But yeah,
You'll get there.
We don't have the most tech savvy bunch, to be honest, and so that's sort of, she could attest to that as well.
Yeah.
She was ours before she left for the IU.
So just as a summary of what Mrs. Cox said, for those of you that couldn't hear, we're great. The end. No, so Mrs. Cox, she's an IU consultant now, but she was our emotional support teacher for years, and our check-in check-out coordinator. Basically, you know, if the check-in check-out point sheet is not working with the teacher, or the kid is forgetting to give it to their teacher, that's when you evaluate as a system, like, is this the appropriate intervention for them? Do they need something more than just check in, check out? Or do we just need to provide some coaching with the student on remembering to give their teacher the point sheet? But, you know, as I like to say, they don't have fully developed prefrontal cortexes yet, so it is our job to be their prefrontal cortex as much as we can. Yeah, question right there.
I think something to remember that check and check out works best with kids who are actually seeking relationships. So if their function is to escape adult attention, those are the kids that are not tuning their attention.
Yes, that's an excellent point. So check in, check out is most useful as an intervention for students that are seeking adult attention, not trying to escape it. Did you have something else?
Yeah, and then we tried electronic at our school because we tried things like that, and the teachers were the problem. They weren't filling it out. They were, I'm not going to fill it out till the end of the day.
Right.
And you're not giving the child feedback at the end of every period, and it wasn't. It's totally defeating the point of having it.
Yep. A hurdle with the electronic point sheet, just as a summary, was that teachers were forgetting to fill it out or filling it out at the end of the day, which is not that immediate feedback. And also, I don't remember what I did at the beginning of the day, so I'm certainly not going to remember what a student did at the beginning of the day.
Yes, and the specialist, health and phys ed, sometimes I get 6 folders at one time. So I prefer that tangible folder because one, it helps me build a relationship with them. I can discuss the behavior. And our specialists don't get pushback because it's been sold to us, help us help you. Because if we're helping them learn expected behavior, it resolves issues in our class as well. However, and get off that subject, I have a different question.
Sure. Can I just summarize your first point there for the recording? So what she had mentioned, that as a specialist, for her, it's more helpful to have the tangible point sheet because she'll sometimes get several at one time, and that also helps to foster a relationship. So great from the special content areas that we're building relationships and, you know, seeing that across settings. Excellent. And then your second question?
We achieved tier 1 fidelity. We are now, give me this color banner, we're in tier fidelity maintenance this year. I'm a co-coach with another specialist. We have no classroom teachers who are coaching.
Interesting.
So specialists are coaching the PBIS.
Okay.
And so I guess we want to look at tier 2. Is there a meeting? I mean, honestly, this is my first training, and I got a 97% last year. Winging it. So,
It's so easy.
what? Tier 2's not looking that easy.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out, how do I even know where to start with tier 2?
Sure. So to summarize again for the recording, she's saying that she and another area specialist are the coaches. And so she's wondering, what is the starting point for tier 2? How do we get this up and running? And so I think that initially we need to figure out who can help you, right? Are your school counselors? Do you have a school psych, school social worker, anybody extra? Building sub can maybe every now and then help you run some things. So you've got to identify who are the people that can help you, what are they willing to do, and what are their scheduling, what's their availability, what are the constraints, And then we do need to kind of have a plan in place. So when we screen, then we are to intervene, right? So we can't screen all these kids and realize we have 50 or 60 of them that really need some support and not have some sort of a concept of what we might do about it.
So I guess what you're saying is I need to have a board meeting.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
I would say the first thing you should do is develop a tier 2 core team, like, or a committee maybe, not a core
Right.
team, but our tier 2 team, well, it's just you and me, but our tier,
Yeah.
but we're also on the tier 1 team. But once we started rolling out tier 2, we kind of took a step back from tier 1, and we attend the meetings that
Right.
we're able to attend. I'm a school psych for 2 buildings, so I've got 18 billion meetings. I can't always get to PBIS core team. So I would say create a tier 2 system, involve your mental health supports at your building, and also reach out to your IU supports. So whoever comes in and does your tier 1 fidelity checks, they can support you in getting tier 2 up and running. That's what we did. Thanks, Julie.
Yeah, and as a quick addition to that, so when you were evaluated by the IU for banner status for tier 1, they use that TFI, the Tiered Fidelity Inventory. That's what it's called, right? Yeah. So there's also a version of that for tier 2 and tier 3. I think it's actually all one packet. So if you're able to go down through and kind of self-score what you already might have in place, and then areas of need, that would be good information to share with that core team, your administrator, to decide when it might be best to continue on with the more advanced tiers.
And you'll probably need some administrative or mental health support for filling that out, because it was easy for us to do because that's the water we swim in. You're swimming in very different water, so we need to get you connected to the right people. Yeah. Ooh, you pick. I'm
Go
overwhelmed.
ahead, yep.
Also recommend anybody who's looking to scale up, in addition to looking at the TFI2, is to look and research anything about intervention grids, which essentially is your resource mapping of who, what, where, when.
Okay.
What do we have? What curriculums do we have available? What do we need a budget for? When can they be delivered? Where can they be delivered? Do we have space available?
Correct.
So starting with your resource mapping, but then your intervention grids are really key because it looks at what is this particular intervention serving a purpose for? What is the function of behavior it's supporting? How are students getting into this intervention? How are we progress monitoring? How are they exiting?
Right.
So that's a really good starting point is grid mapping for interventions for anyone looking to dabble with tier 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so quick summary. Intervention grid mapping is a great place to start for tier 2 intervention planning. We actually did that with the IU. They gave us the resources and kind of the templates for that. So with the intervention mapping, you map out who has the time, where it could occur, what interventions you have available, what are they for, what do you need to buy, and that the shorter that list is, the more admin buy-in you get.
Yeah, right.
We like to find free things. Yeah, question.
So this is back to the SRSS.
Yeah.
School psychologists kind of review. What do you do or have you encountered when you get responses from the SRSS that are, what school psych say, extremely questionable, or, not exactly accurate? So, you screen and treat, but what if they're screening and they're incredibly biased, or they're incredibly, viewed through the days of the lens?
So
We have
what do
some of
you
those.
do? What do you do when your SRSS data is skewed or feels overly negative? Now, we've never encountered that ever. Nobody ever has a negative attitude. No, I'm just kidding. It happens all the time. And typically those are the ones where the whole class is coming up red. And so that's often where we're going in and we're doing the whole class intervention, because it's also like, we don't tell the teacher like, hey, okay, we're here for your intervention lesson. Bye, go ahead. We ask them to stay and listen and participate, so they're hearing the language as well. And honestly, typically, if the teacher is being really overly negative about a student's behavior, I already have had conversations with them because they're already referring the student to me. So then it just becomes an additional problem solving. I try really hard to convince the teacher that we're on the same team, whether or not I'm evaluating the student or not. Like, we have the same goal for you and the student to have a good day. And so framing it that way is typically pretty helpful. I will say, just like anything in education, the SRSS is one piece of data. Sometimes we put kids in groups that didn't come up high on the SRSS. You know, it's a relatively limited tool. It's an Excel spreadsheet. And so there are times where we need to put kids in groups because they have a specific need that didn't pop up on the SRSS. On the other end, sometimes we don't put kids in groups that maybe come up high because it's a teacher relationship problem and my group is not going to solve that.
Right. And also sometimes the teachers will weigh the cost and benefit of them missing academic time, right? So we have a lot of overlap with students that receive special education services. Sometimes they also have other related services in addition to learning support or emotional support. So again, this is one piece of the puzzle, but it's a really nice starting point, again, especially for those internalizing kids that maybe we don't already know.
Yeah, I forgot to mention this. So you'll see on the very end, we have our monitor group. That would be kids that maybe came up high on the screener, but either the teacher said they didn't need intervention, or, you know, sometimes we'll have kids who are like, well, they've been in social skills 4 times.
Right.
I'm not putting them in social skills again. They clearly, that's clearly not working. So sometimes that monitor group is helpful, and then we can continue to monitor them through their daily SEL or status check, SEL status check on the PBIS rewards app. So again, it's just one piece of data. So sometimes it's not useful, and that's just a limitation of any tool.
Right. Yes.
Do you have any advice on progress monitoring group-based intervention to determine, like, for example, social skills and more time and contact?
Right, so the question was, how are we monitoring, especially in a group setting? And she's referencing, you know, this kid's had social skills 4 times. And so sometimes, you know, at that point, we need to look at, are we dealing with a student that maybe is just atypical, right? Are we dealing with a student that maybe needs more than social skills? Are we needing specially designed instruction? Do we need to have a PST meeting and involve the school psych to see if they need some additional special education type services? So I would say that's one way. And oftentimes, you know, we've had kids, maybe they continue to pop up on the screener. We've done social skills, so maybe we'll try general mental health instead. And we do typically talk to the teachers about that. You know, we've already had this kid in intervention. What are your thoughts? Can you think of other things that you'd like us to work on? And sometimes it does transfer over to individual work. So maybe I need to do something more targeted and more specific, again, based on teacher recommendation and what I already know about the student.
We are continuing to evolve our progress monitoring. We've used the DBR, direct behavior rating tool, in the past, like where we've gone out and observed them at recess. The problem is that when I've had them in group, they know who I am. Yeah. And so, and often the kids that are in social skills, when I'm out on the playground, they're not interacting with their peers, they're right here.
Right.
Hi, Mrs. Tierney.
Yeah. I think another thing, and obviously, you know, this is a bigger problem than any of us can solve today, the baseline for atypicality, social deficits, anxiety, anger, it's all different than it was. So everything is elevated, right? It's more severe, I would say, for kids and adults alike. And so sometimes that is my answer. You know, the baseline for atypicality is just different now. So are we talking about somebody who needs intervention, or are we talking about somebody that really is just maybe atypical by your definition, right? And maybe that's not the best answer, but in my experience as a school counselor, that is certainly what we're seeing, at least at our school.
Human beings are just weird, and that translates to children too.
Right. Other questions? No. Okay, well, we're wrapped up here a little bit early, which is nice since we're the last group of the day. We will stay for a little bit and hang out in case you need something more specific from us, but otherwise, you're free to go. Okay. Thank you.